Good morning and welcome. This is Mission Control in Houston. We're here in the International Space Station's Flight Control Room as a team of flight controllers, led by Flight Director Brandon Lloyd, oversee the rendezvous and capture of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus freighter. Soon we'll get a live look from the orbiting lab as Cygnus approaches the vicinity of the space station.
To a reflection in the monitor. So we think right now it adjusted back and is in good focus for the monitor view. So if you could change the focus on the camera to manual, then we think we'll keep the focus we have now, even when we go into eclipse.
After that, it's set to manual.
You just heard the words of Capcom Jackie Mahaffey as she's communicating with the astronauts aboard the International Space Station. NASA astronaut Raj Achari is taking the lead on this operation on the space station's robotic arm, with astronaut Kayla Barron backing him up. You'll often hear her voice communicating back with Capcom as Raj is working with the robotic arm. Soon we're going to have a live look of from the International Space Station, tracking the arrival of Northrop Grumman's Cygnus cargo freighter as it makes its way closer to the station for rendezvous and capture. While you won't be able to see much of the spacecraft now, it's currently about 2,500 meters away from the space station, but as it gets closer, you'll be able to get a better look at the approaching Cygnus vehicle. Cygnus is already well on its way to the orbiting lab, having completed a number of steps on its checklist before it reaches the station. Flight Director Brandon Lloyd, who you see on your screen on the left, pulled the team here in Mission Control Houston and the team in the Cygnus Flight Control Room in Dulles to make sure that the navigation systems, thrusters, and the spacecraft overall are doing well, and confirm that Cygnus was a go to continue for its ADV 1 and 2 burns. These first two burns, or the approach delta velocity burns, fired nominally. At another checkpoint just 10 minutes ago, the Houston and Dulles teams agreed that Cygnus was ready to complete 2 more ADV burns, again, approach delta velocity burns. This time we're talking about burns 3 and 4, and they polled so that they were a go to do so. These thruster firings are set to begin soon for the 3rd burn, also known as Cygnus's approach initiation burn, and we're expecting about 15 minutes between burns 3 and 4. Sounds like teams here on the ground are expecting that ADV burn number 3 to occur in about 5 minutes from now. These burns will help carry Cygnus through the space station's approach ellipsoid. When vehicles like Cygnus are outside of the approach ellipsoid, it means they're on a 24-hour safe, free drift trajectory. So if something were to go wrong and teams on the ground were unable to control Cygnus, we know it would not enter this imaginary line for at least 24 hours and would not go any closer to the space station than this point. The approach ellipsoid is used as a milestone for all vehicles approaching and departing from the space station, and teams have reported that Cygnus and its onboard systems are working just fine.
And copy that. Over on 2. Thanks.
We're now less than 2 minutes away from Cygnus's approach initiation burn. At this point, Cygnus is just outside of 2,000 meters away from the International Space Station. We just got confirmation that the ADV-3 burn is underway. Coming up next for Cygnus after these burns, we expect the flight control teams to hold when Cygnus is about 250 meters away from the station. This hold is expected and part of the timeline in Cygnus's approach. Cygnus's flight control team in Dulles will use this hold to verify that Cygnus is performing as expected. They'll want to know that the thrusters are operational, if the navigation hardware is working, and if everything on the space station is ready to receive the vehicle. Mission Control Houston will conduct another go, no-go poll before continuing. This system check is performed at this point because at 250 meters away, Cygnus will be just outside of the keep-out sphere. Like the approach ellipsoid, the keep-out sphere is another imaginary safety zone, this time with a 300-meter radius around the station.
station, Houston on 2 for Cygnus.
Cygnus began its journey to the orbiting laboratory on Saturday, February 19th, when it launched atop an Antares rocket from Pad 0A at the Mid-Atlantic Regional Spaceport at NASA's Wallops Flight Facility on the eastern shore of Virginia. Antares and Cygnus launched right on time at 11:40 a.m. Central Time, kicking off Northrop Grumman's 17th commercial resupply mission to the International Space Station. The station passes over the launch site a few minutes before T-0, and Cygnus then works to catch up to the station once in orbit. At the time of launch, the station and its 7 crew members were flying over northern Algeria, south of the Mediterranean Sea.
And are standing by for monitoring per 1.102.
8 minutes later, Antares finished its job of getting Cygnus into orbit, and the spacecraft separated from the launch vehicle. Cygnus's round solar arrays deployed shortly after, undergoing a number of maneuvers to raise Cygnus to the same altitude as the space station. And that brings us where we are today. Inside the Cygnus spacecraft sits 8,300 pounds of cargo, including supplies, hardware, and food. This includes materials needed to support several research investigations already ongoing during Expedition 66, but also includes some brand new science experiments as well. In this video, you'll hear about experiments from growing plants in space to drug treatments on breast and prostate cancer cells that could lead to greater patient outcomes here on Earth. These are just a few highlights of the many investigations on board, but Cygnus is delivering a number of other goodies as well. To keep up with the science investigations and more, be sure to follow at ISS_research for the latest. In addition to these science investigations, Cygnus is also delivering critical hardware to be installed during some future spacewalks. The hardware launching with Cygnus is used to build struts for the next set of IROSAs, or ISS Roll-Out Solar Arrays. The IROSAs are an innovative new solar array design that roll out like a rug. The space station's current solar arrays are doing just fine, but have been showing some signs of degradation. The IROSAs are not designed to replace the current rigid solar arrays, but rather be positioned in front of the 6 current arrays, greatly increasing the station's total available power.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Cygnus range is 1,000 meters. Monitor long-range approach per step 1 in 1.102. Cygnus approach and retreat monitoring.
The Cygnus spacecraft is now less than 1,000 meters away from the International Space Station.
Crew is monitoring long-range approach per the procedure, step 1.
The voice you just heard was NASA astronaut Kayla Barron as she's relaying communications as NASA astronaut Rajachari takes the lead on today's operations on the robotic arm. Cygnus is now about 750 meters away from the International Space Station as it flies over Western Australia, and we just got confirmation that the vehicle has moved through the space station's approach ellipsoid. After this, we'll expect the Cygnus vehicle to pause at a hold point at 250 meters away from the space station, and again at 30 meters away from the International Space Station. These are planned and expected, and is just another time to check out the vehicle and make sure that it's ready, as well as making sure that the space station is ready to receive it. Cygnus is now in view. It's a tiny dot right now as it makes its way from land to sea during this crossover on your screen. It's a small silver dot, but as it gets closer, the Cygnus will be much bigger. Later on in this broadcast, we expect to get views from the robotic arm itself as you're looking down the barrel of the arm. This will provide for some really good views of the service section on the Cygnus. The Cygnus vehicle is about 550 meters away from the space station. Somewhere around the 500 meter point, we expect that fourth burn, the ADV4 burn, to begin. After that, the next milestone in Cygnus's journey is 250 meters away from the space station, where it will reach its hold point. We're going to see the range rate of the Cygnus vehicle decrease, and it's going to be in a hold as ground teams in Dulles and right here in Houston check out the vehicle. When Cygnus arrives, it will be installed to the Earth-facing side of the station's Unity module. It's scheduled to stay until the end of May.
Station Houston on 2 for Tom.
Houston Station on 2. Did you call Tom?
Yeah, wondering if we could get your help finding some double-sided tape for Piotr.
Okay, yeah, sure. And do you have a location for me to start looking?
We do. You will find it in Node 1, Overhead 4, Delta 1, Echo 1, in the miscellaneous tape pantry. There's a half CTB, serial number 1178.
Okay, Jackie, I copied Node 1, Overhead 4, Delta 1, Echo 1, and the miscellaneous tape pantry 1178.
Yep, that's right, and you're looking for a double-sided tape.
Copy, double-sided tape.
What you're seeing now is a view from the centerline berthing system. This is the same view that NASA astronauts Rajachari and Kayla Barron are seeing. They're doing this operation today from the space station's cupola. So this is where they're getting this view, and it's used to help understand the alignment of this visiting vehicle today. Northrop Grumman has a history of naming its resupply spacecraft after notable people in the aerospace community, and this Cygnus is no different, bearing the moniker the SS Piers Sellers. Piers Sellers, near and dear to our hearts here at NASA's Johnson Space Center, as he was a member of our NASA Astronaut Corps here in Houston. He was selected to become an astronaut in 1996 and would go on to serve 3 spaceflight missions, STS-112, STS-21, and STS-132. Sellers logged a total of 34 days, 23 hours in space. 41 of those hours were spent spacewalking, with many spacewalks having the goal of space station assembly. His career then took him to NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center, where he led the Earth Sciences Division, continuing his work as a climate scientist.
Houston Station on 2 for tape.
Go ahead, on 2.
Jackie, the only tape item in that half CTV that says double-sided is the double-sided foam tape, half-inch. Is that what you want?
Tom, good question. We are checking, and when we get back to you, we'll probably try calling you on Space to Ground 3, just to clear 2 for the rendezvous.
Sounds good. I'll talk to you on 3 in just a little bit.
Cygnus is now about 375 meters away from the space station. Slowly getting bigger here on your screen. Still a tiny dot. Currently, the Cygnus and the space station are flying across the southern tip of New Zealand. Cygnus is steadily approaching 350 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, we expect it to hold once it's 250 meters away. The range rate will set to decrease so it can slow its motion down. At this point, the flight director Brandon Lloyd will conduct a go, no-go poll. Make sure that the systems on board Cygnus and that the International Space Station is ready to receive the vehicle. We're no longer getting these nice views of Earth. That's because the Cygnus and the space station have moved into an orbital nighttime. That's perfectly fine for right now, as the Cygnus is still approaching the space station. But once it gets closer, the lighting conditions become very important. So there's a number of holds planned into the timeline, a couple of windows to use the most optimal lighting so that astronaut Rajachari can get the best view when operating the robotic arm and the cameras inside of it. We're in a brief but expected handover period. The data and communications come through the Tracking, Data, and Relay Satellite Systems, or TDRS. TDRS isn't one satellite, but a constellation of satellites in geosynchronous orbit. They work together to provide near continuous communication. And as you can see, sometimes we lose visuals when handing over from one satellite to the other. Fortunately, we know when these brief pauses are coming and can plan around them, and we expect to get our visuals of the Cygnus spacecraft coming back soon. While everyone in this room is all working together to complete the mission of rendezvous and capture of the Cygnus spacecraft, there are some key players here today in this room. We talked about Brandon Lloyd, our flight director, and Jackie Mahaffey is our Capcom communicating with the crew. We also have VVO, or the Visiting Vehicle Officer, and Cygnus is a visiting vehicle, cargo ship approaching the space station. And then later on, we'll have Robo, our robotics officer, playing a role in the installation or berthing of the Cygnus spacecraft. So while we're talking about the key players in this room here, we've briefly mentioned the key players aboard the space station for this mission. NASA astronaut Raj Achari will take the lead on capturing Cygnus today, and NASA astronaut Caleb Barron will serve as his backup. Even though Barron is backup, she is indeed working this operation this morning. She'll aid Chari during the mission and will serve as communication to mission control while Chari controls the robotic arm. They'll both have eyes on the spacecraft. They're in the cupola right now. They'll also have more sophisticated tracking on their monitors, which we may get a view of later. Both spent some time last week practicing grappling techniques and understanding various lighting conditions that they might experience. These two will aid in the rendezvous and capture, but the astronauts will actually be hands-off for the installation of Cygnus to the space station later this morning. They'll move on to complete other daily tasks aboard the space station while ground controllers install the spacecraft. This job belongs to Robo, or the robotics officer, who we just saw in the room. Cygnus is now 280 meters away from the space station, approaching that expected 250-meter hold. The visiting vehicle officer we spoke about earlier speaks directly with the Northrop Grumman team in Dulles, Virginia, as the two control centers move through the steps to install Cygnus to the space station later this morning. Right here, you're getting a live view from Dulles at Northrop Grumman's Mission Control Center. These are the folks dedicated to the Cygnus spacecraft and are able to send commands to it. As Cygnus approaches 250 meters, the range rate is decreasing. Range rate is calculated in meters per second and is the velocity between Cygnus and the space station. Basically how quickly the distance is closing. Has to slow down for this hold to get to 250 meters. It is currently 257 meters away from the space station, and the folks here in Mission Control Houston are now checking out the vehicle, going through its various systems, and seeing if it's okay to proceed through this hold. You're getting a live view of this screen with some green overlays. What you just saw was a live view of the robotics workstation in the cupola of the space station, with the camera pointed right at the screens. This is the same screen that Raj Attari and Kayla Barron, our NASA astronauts working today's operation. This is what they're looking at as they look at the approaching Cygnus vehicle. What you see in the green and black overlays is the telemetry data in real time. They'll use these tools to use the joystick and hand controls to guide the arm to capture Cygnus. If you look at the right side of the screen, it says VV to ISS with some numbers below it. This stands for Visiting Vehicle to the International Space Station and notes the distance Cygnus is away from the station. You can see right now that it's 254 meters away and steadily decreasing as it approaches the 250 meter hold. Cygnus is now 252 meters away from the space station, and its hold at 250 meters is expected in less than 1 minute. The Cygnus spacecraft has reached 250 meters and is holding.
And Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Please confirm Cygnus 250 meter hold per step 2 in 1.102.
Roger that. We are happy to report we see the gray corridor displayed on the overlay and monitors 1 and 3, The Cygnus command panel LED status matches the procedure. The frame counter is incrementing, and current pry range is 525.64. And correction, I misspoke there. It's 252.19 currently.
Houston copies. 252.
You just heard Capcom Jackie Mahaffey communicating with NASA astronauts Rajatari and Kayla Barron as they go through the steps to complete the 250-meter hold. We're holding at the 250-meter point because the keep-out sphere, another imaginary sphere, has a 200-meter radius around the space station. So we're holding just outside the keep-out sphere. While imaginary, the keep-out sphere serves as a protective barrier for the space station, and Mission Control must give a go to Cygnus to cross this point. They're likely to conduct some systems checks on Cygnus, and shortly they'll be conducting a go-no-go poll.
The light is within the corridor. The vehicle size relative to the outline matches. The light is offset from the circle 1.5 widths starboard and about a quarter vehicle length aft. And the circle is offset from the center of the corridor to vehicle widths port.
Houston copies.
Houston, I would add to that report that that was made off of monitor 1, the starboard 1 lower outboard camera, which we have zoomed in order to make that call. Monitor 3 is still zoomed out, but it looks like it's matching in similar trends.
Kayla, we were not quite expecting the offset you called. If you can zoom in on the other monitor and give us a similar Bravo assessment, then we'll be able to compare the two.
Mark.
Astronaut Kayla Barron communicating now with the ground while inside the cupola with NASA astronaut Rajatari. They're getting their screens configured and making sure their data that they see on their screens is matching up the data that we're getting here on the ground. The go-no-go poll to depart the 250-meter mark is now underway.
In station on 2, Block Bravo report on monitor 3 using the port 1 lower outboard camera. The light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset from the circle about a quarter vehicle width forward, or length forward, and just slightly starboard. And the circle is offset from the center of the corridor to vehicle width port.
Houston, copy. Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Cygnus and ISS are configured for approach inside the keep-out sphere. Expect approach to resume shortly and stand by for Cygnus PCS command checkout.
Station copy, standing by.
After listening to the data that NASA astronaut Caleb Barron had reported to the ground, and also checking out the Cygnus spacecraft and all of its onboard systems, as well as polling the folks here in Mission Control and over at Northrop Grumman's over in Dulles, we are go to proceed to the 250-meter hold, and Capcom Jackie Mahaffey just relayed to the crew to expect movement on Cygnus. And indeed, it has moved past the 250-meter point and is continuing on to its next milestone.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Cygnus has resumed approach. Go for Cygnus PCS command checkout. The hold arm per step 3 in 1.102.
Station copies, approach has resumed. We'll be performing step 3 in 1.102.
This go to proceed doesn't just mean that Cygnus can continue going closer to the space station and continue on with its movement, it also means that Cygnus is go to move into the space station's keep out sphere. Again, this is an imaginary threshold 200 meters away from the International Space Station. As you can see here on our screen, we did just get confirmation that Cygnus can move through the keep out sphere, and the next milestone is to move through the keep out sphere. After that, the next milestone we'll look out for is another planned hold, this time at 30 meters away from the International Space Station. We'll do another go, no-go poll here.
Go for Cygnus PCS command checkout, disarm for step 4.
Station copies, go for step 4. Houston Station, hold command disarmed.
Houston copies. Cygnus PCS command checkout was successful. Begin monitoring approach from 250 meters per step 5 in 1.102.
Station copies, monitor approach per step 5.
Just got confirmation that at 197 meters away from the space station,
Cygnus is inside the 200-meter keep-out sphere. Crew now has authority to issue an abort if no comm with MCCH and the light is outside the corridor.
Capcom Jackie Mahaffey.
Crew has authority to issue an abort command with no comm with Houston and light outside of corridor.
Capcom Jackie Mahaffey and NASA astronaut Caleb Barron communicating. They're both in agreement. The Cygnus vehicle is now inside the keep out sphere. As Cygnus proceeds nominally toward its planned 30-meter hold point, NASA astronauts Rajachari and Caleb Barron are readying the Canadarm2, getting ready to capture the SS Piers Sellers Cygnus spacecraft. If you're just joining us, Mission Control Houston is monitoring the approach of the Cygnus spacecraft that launched from NASA's Wallops Flight Facility on Saturday. The spacecraft continues to get close enough for astronaut Rajachari inside the station's cupola to grab on with the station's robotic arm. It paused for a brief hold when the spacecraft was 250 meters away, and after a brief checkout of Cygnus's navigation, thrusters, and other onboard systems, the Cygnus flight control team in Dulles got the go for Cygnus to enter the keep-out sphere. This keep-out sphere is an imaginary marker 200 meters from the space station. At this point, if anything unexpected happens with the spacecraft, the astronauts on board have the authority to issue an abort if the crew sees something wrong that the ground may not be able to see. However, the vehicle is approaching nominally and is arriving at its next milestone, the 30-meter hold point. The Cygnus spacecraft just reached 150 meters away from the International Space Station as it flies over the northern tip of Nicaragua.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus and cameras.
On 2.
We want to give you a little bit more information about what we think we're seeing based on your different Block Bravo calls from the S1 and P1 cameras. We think, based on how your view in Monitor 3 is matching our data we're getting directly from Cygnus, that there may be a small bias on the camera in Monitor 1. Right now, it's small enough that you can still use both views, and we expect it to stay that way through capture, but we'll continue taking your Block Bravo calls from both and keep an eye on it as we head closer.
Roger that, and let us know when you're ready for an updated Block Bravo report.
Kayla, we will take you up on another Block Bravo call around 100 meters.
Roger that.
We're now about 45 minutes away from the expected capture of the Cygnus spacecraft. Cygnus is now about 120 meters away from the space station, and our Capcom Jackie Mahaffey just communicated with Kayla Barron that once we get a little closer to 100 meters away, that they would like another readout of kind of the data that they're seeing on their screens compared to the data that we have here in Mission Control. Cygnus is now less than 100 meters away from the International Space Station as the station approaches a flyover of the Bermuda Island. Once again, we're waiting for a hold at 30 meters away from the space station, where flight controllers will conduct another go, no-go poll.
Houston Station on 2 for Block Bravo report.
Go ahead.
On monitor 1, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset from the circle a quarter vehicle width starboard and slightly aft, and the circle is offset from the center of the corridor a quarter vehicle width starboard. On monitor 3, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset from the circle ever so slightly forward, but it's converging. And the circle is offset from the center of the corridor a quarter vehicle width starboard.
Houston copies. We like that report.
Cygnus is now within 80 meters of the space station, but the goal here is not to get to 0 meters away. So for what's going to happen next is the spacecraft will hold at 30 meters away and then do a go, no-go poll for its capture point later on. This is expected about 10 to 12 meters away from the space station, which is the optimal distance away that NASA astronaut Raj Chari can grab on using the space station's robotic arm. We're getting a great view of the Cygnus spacecraft now as the spacecraft and the International Space Station work towards moving to an orbital daytime. We talked a little bit earlier about how inside this particular Cygnus vehicle, this SS Piers Sellers, contains hardware to build struts for the next set of IROSAs, or International Space Station Rollout Solar Arrays. A spacewalk is planned to install this hardware on March 15th. So far, 2 rollout solar arrays have been installed. NASA astronaut Shane Kimbrough and ESA astronaut Thomas Pesquet conducted a series of 3 spacewalks to unfurl the 2 IROSAs installed so far. The first happened on June 16, 2021, where the duo did some prep work, moving the array to a mounting bracket on the 2B power channel on the port 6 truss of the space station. And a few days later, Kimbrough and Pesquet suited up again to complete the installation and deploy the arrays, and completed a third spacewalk to finish the job. The same solar array design will be used to power parts of the future lunar orbiting outpost called the Gateway under NASA's Artemis program. The range rate steadily decreasing as Cygnus approaches its 30-meter hold point. This range rate is how quickly the gap is closing between the space station and the Cygnus vehicle. This range rate is calculated in meters per second and is the velocity between Cygnus and the space station, basically how quickly the distance is closing. The goal of this 30-meter hold is to evaluate the spacecraft before it moves to its capture point about 10 meters from the space station, where astronaut Rajachari will grab on using the station's robotic arm. The team here in the International Space Station's Flight Control Room, under the direction of Flight Director Brandon Lloyd, are now preparing to begin the go-no-go pull. Cygnus is still 48 meters away from the space station, and this pull will be conducted at 30 meters. The SS Piers Sellers that you see on your screen now will be the first Cygnus vehicle to have the capability to reboost the space station. Using its available remaining propellant, Cygnus will perform a number of reboost burns during its time on the space station. This screen with the green overlays is a live view of the robotics workstation in the cupola, where NASA astronauts Caleb Barron and Rajachari are monitoring the operations. You can see just how precisely they have Cygnus in their sights as they prepare to first move through this 30-meter hold point, then seeing Cygnus as it gets to the 10-meter hold point, and then grabbing on with the space station's robotics arm under the controls of NASA astronaut Rajachari. You can see on the right middle of your screen how under VV to ISS that Cygnus is 34 meters away from the space station, slowly decreasing as we reach 30 meters away. Earlier today, NASA astronaut Caleb Barron communicated with the ground, confirming that what she sees on her monitors just matches up with the data that we're getting here on the ground. Cygnus is now 33 meters away as it flies across the southern tip of Ireland.
Station Houston on 2 for Cygnus. Confirm 30-meter hold and set up for capture per step 6 in 1.102.
Houston station copy. Step 6, the pry range is 30.97 and slowly decreasing. And the vehicle mode is hold.
Houston copies.
Cygnus is now at its 30-meter hold point, and the Capcom communicated with the astronauts aboard the space station, and they confirmed that that's what they're seeing as well. The go-no-go poll here in Mission Control Houston is now underway. The go-no-go poll is underway as Cygnus is holding at the 30-meter point. The flight director, Brandon Lloyd, is receiving a number of status reports from the various systems in this operation, including the robotics arm, the robotics officer, who is responsible for the robotic arm, and the visiting vehicle officer as well.
Ready here on the ground, and when you are ready, we'll take your call at the end of 3.2 in 1.110.
Houston Station, crew ready for Cygnus approach to capture point.
Cygnus is ready to proceed to the capture point. Expect approach to resume shortly.
Mission Control Houston has given a go for Cygnus to proceed through and continue on after holding at 30 meters. This go to proceed towards the capture point.
Cygnus has resumed approach to the capture point. Monitor approach within 30 meters per step 7 in 1.102. Crew is primed to issue retreat if the primary range is less than 6 meters.
Station copies. Step 7 of 1.102. Crew is primed to issue retreat command for pry range less than 6 meters.
The crew received word that we did pull a go here in Mission Control Houston to move past the 30-meter hold point and onto the capture point as the space station was flying over the country of Turkey. This go means that Cygnus can now proceed to its final approach to its capture point. Lighting conditions are critical once it reaches this point, as astronauts will want to use the camera on the robotic arm to see Cygnus, and operating in an orbital daytime can provide the right conditions for that. Teams here on the ground are in no hurry, and many windows are built into the timeline where the spacecraft can pause for better lighting conditions. Cygnus is on the move once again, now at 25 meters away from the space station, with that number decreasing.
Houston Station on 2 for Block Bravo report.
Go ahead, on 2.
Station on Monitor 1, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is offset from the circle very slightly aft, and the circle is offset from the corridor very slightly starboard. On monitor 3, the light is within the corridor. The vehicle size matches the outline. The light is centered in the circle, and the circle is offset from the center of the corridor, slightly starboard.
Houston copies.
If you're just joining us, this Cygnus vehicle is approaching its capture point 10 to 12 meters away from the space station. It's currently just on the outside of 20 meters away. Previously, it did a brief hold at 30 meters away, and then again at the 250-meter mark. Both of these milestones were expected and planned into the timeline of today's events. Cygnus is on the move once again to its capture point, on its way to becoming attached to the space station's Earth-facing port on the Unity module.
Station Houston on 2 for your S1 view. We think you're going to run out of room there on your screen. If you take a look at step 3 in 1.110 and pan per step 3.1, you should be able to continue that tracking the vehicle in monitor 1.
Sure.
Cygnus is now nearing 15 meters away from the space station as the space station crosses over the United Arab Emirates. You're now getting live views of the camera on the lees, or the latching end effector of the space station's robotic arm. The robotic arm will capture Cygnus today at the controls of NASA astronaut Raj Achari, with astronaut Caleb Barron with the assist. They're now in the cupola with eyes on Cygnus. Once captured, they'll hand off control of the robotic arm to the robotics officer here in Mission Control Houston. Cygnus has now arrived at its capture point. At this point, one final go, no-go poll will be conducted here in Mission Control Houston and with the flight control team over in Dulles, Virginia. With a go from Flight Director Brandon Lloyd, Rajachari is go for capture. The poll is expected to begin here shortly.
Station Houston on 2. Confirm capture point hold for step 8 in 1.102.
Station copies. Perform step 8 of 1.102.
Cygnus is now at its capture point, holding steady about 12 meters away from the space station. Cygnus is now at the capture point, and the go, no-go poll is underway.
Houston Station, capture conditions confirmed and crew ready for Cygnus capture.
Stand by for capture.
Standing by.
Station Houston on 2. Go for Cygnus capture sequence, step 4 in 1.110, Cygnus capture. Begin monitoring the backaway cue card.
Station copies. Go for capture sequence. Backaway cue card applies.
After polling green across the board, Capcom Jackie Mahaffey communicated with the crew in orbit that we are go for capture. With the go for capture, you may start to see the robotic arm inch closer to the spacecraft in preparation for its upcoming grapple. The arm is expected to make contact with the capture target, followed by the closing of the snares on the lee, or the latching end effectors. In other words, the robotics arm's hand will firmly grab its target. We just got confirmation that the robotic arm is in motion. At the bottom of the spacecraft, you'll see a circle with a sort of pinwheel pattern on it and a black strip on top. That's Cygnus's capture target there on the spacecraft service section. We're continuing to close in. The snares are at work here on the robotic arm of Canadarm2. And we have confirmed capture of Northrop Grumman's 17th commercial resupply mission at 3:44 a.m. Central Time as the space station and the SS Piers Sellers Cygnus are flying over the Indian Ocean.
Houston Station on 2, Cygnus capture is complete. Your go for Cygnus post-capture reconfiguration. Congratulations to the MCCH and Dulles team and to Northrop Grumman, and welcome aboard again to Piers Sellers. The last time he was here was building the station, and we're welcoming back this vehicle. He worked at Goddard and climate science, and it's a daily reminder to us with the experiments on board to help with the climate of the Earth in his name and legacy, and we're happy to be a part of that. And congratulations, and thanks for all the support from all the teams that got this wonderful vehicle here.
Houston copies and concurs with all.
At the controls of NASA astronaut Rajachari inside the cupola, Canadarm2 made contact with the Cygnus vehicle, and the snares of the arm at the end of the arm retracted, much like a hand grasping onto the handle. We have confirmation of the capture at 3:44 a.m. Central as the space station and the SS Piers Sellers flew over the Indian Ocean. Following this good snare closure and closing of the latches, NASA astronaut Rajachari congratulated the Northrop Grumman and NASA teams, welcoming the SS Piers Sellers, and giving a nod to the late astronaut who had played such a critical role in the assembly of the space station where Chari now resides. To recap this weekend's events, Cygnus kicked off Northrop Grumman's CRS-17 mission atop an Antares rocket that launched from NASA's Wallops Flight Facility at 11:40 a.m. Central Time on Saturday, February 19th. Cygnus's day-and-a-half journey took it to the vicinity of the space station earlier this morning, while NASA astronauts Rajachari and his backup, NASA astronaut Caleb Barron, monitored its approach through the approach ellipsoid and the keep-out sphere, and finally to its capture point. Chari grappled the spacecraft using the robotic arm, but they'll be hands off the Cygnus after this, moving on to other tasks aboard the orbiting lab. Control now switches over to the robotics officer, who will work to berth Cygnus to the space station. The ground-based controllers will align the spacecraft in preparation of berthing it to the space station's Earth-facing port on the Unity module. This concludes our coverage of rendezvous and capture of the SS Piers Sellers Cygnus. We'll be back on air at 5:30 a.m. Central, 6:30 a.m. Eastern Time for coverage of the spacecraft's ground-controlled installation to the International Space Station. Until then, this is Mission Control Houston signing off.